Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rob Newton, and I'm Marketing Manager here at Visual Impact. And today is part 2 of our wireless networking event presented by Neil Thompson, a Sony Independent Certified Expert and all-round camera guru. This is part 2 of 3, and the final session is tomorrow on Thursday. So if you didn't attend session 1 yesterday, first of all, where were you? We maybe missed you. But the good news is you can always catch up by visiting our website and listen to the recording of part 1. Before we get started, I just want to go through some housekeeping. Please ask plenty of questions. It makes the presentation a lot more engaging and you'll get far more out of this session than if you don't ask questions, obviously. We are recording the webinar and we'll send you a link so you can either pass it on to family or friends or listen to it again if you find any parts that you want to re-go over. If you want to listen to previous webinars, podcasts, or how-to videos, then you can come to our website, visuals.co.uk, and there's plenty of information there for you to hand over. So now I'm going to hand over to Neil, who's going to begin the webinar. Thanks very much.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Rob, for that introduction. This is part 2. You may remember me from such productions as Guide to Networking Part 1, which was a must-see on the web, I believe, and practically broke the internet, I should think, with people queuing up to watch. But we're going to continue our adventures today, looking at what you can do once you've got a connection with your camera. Yesterday was mainly about connecting to the outside world, and today we're going to look at functions such as remote control, streaming, and file transfer, and that kind of thing. So let's. Oh, before we plunge straight in, sorry, there was a gentleman who asked yesterday about connection functions of the A7S Mark III, which of course is a hugely popular camera and very similar to the FX3 camera as well, which is part of the cinema line range of cameras. So the A7S Mark III, I did have a look. I'm not desperately familiar with it myself yet. A fairly powerful set of wireless networking connections, except it doesn't do streaming. It does file transfer. It's got built-in Wi-Fi transmitter and receiver, and you can connect via Bluetooth as well. But there's no actual streaming encoder built into the camcorder. So you've got Wi-Fi connection, wired Ethernet via a USB adapter that you can buy for it, which gives you control and file transfer. And you can also connect via the Imaging Edge application from Sony, which is another free to download application. I don't know what's come over them. It's a miracle. So yeah, A7S Mark III is a pretty powerful piece of kit, as you might expect, but you would need an external device to do the encoding into a streaming format. And we'll have a look at how that kind of thing works later on, because there are other cameras like the FX9, for instance, that doesn't have a streaming encoder built into it that you would need a similar kind of external unit for. Okay, so let's get on with the control of the camera. And well, cameras. We're talking about a range of cameras here: FX9, FX6, PXW Z280, the shoulder mount camcorders, X400, and so on. But the general procedure is to make a connection to the camera and download the Content Browser mobile application to your smart device, whatever it may be. You have to give your camera a username and a password to start with, so that when your camera's connecting to it, your smart device is connecting to it, you can check that it's allowed to access your camera. And as we said yesterday, there are 2 different ways of connecting: station mode and access point mode. I did mention yesterday that the access point mode is slightly less reliable, but if you're not in a Wi-Fi covered area, it's kind of your only option. So that's the way I'm going to connect the camera for now, just to demonstrate the Content Browser mobile. With a bit of luck, what could possibly go wrong here? So let's have a look at the output of our FX9. And in the network menu, I want to go to the wireless LAN settings, and at the moment I'm in station mode, ST mode, and I'm going to change that to access point mode, as we discussed yesterday, which is a different way of connecting, where the camera is the access point and broadcasts its name and address to anybody who wants to connect to it. And I want to connect to it, and I'm going to use, there are different ways of authenticating yourself to make sure you're the right person. And I'm going to use near field communication on my phone with a bit of luck. And I'm going to switch on near field communication. And with a bit of luck, when I tap my phone on the side of the camera here, I don't know whether you heard that little beep there, but I've now got a connection, and I'm going to try and share my screen on my phone. And if you'll just bear with me for a second while I go to my screen sharing application. I think because I'm connected at the same time to my camera, it's not letting me connect at the moment. Just one moment, please. Can you just bear with me for a second while I try and reconnect to my screen sharing? Oh, sorry about that. I'll just come back to it in a minute if you don't mind. When I've just disconnected again from the access point here, I'll just cancel that and go back. But basically, I can connect to the camcorder using Content Browser Mobile and get remote control of the camera there. I'll come back to it in a second. I'll just go back to the presentation sort of material for a moment. And basically the screen of the Content Browser Mobile gives me control of the camera and a feed of the video as well. So I can get control of all the parameters of the camera, such as record, start, stop. I can even control the lens and the iris and so on. And I can also access lots of other functions of the camera to select files for upload and download and so on. The picture replay from the camera comes in with a lag of about a second or so, which is quite acceptable, really. And if you compare it to the cost of buying a sort of third-party wireless transmitter, it's pretty stable, really, and gives you a decent picture for someone to be able to monitor what's going on the camera. If, for instance, you have it on a crane or a jib, and of course you can access the start-stop controls from the camera to start and stop your recording. You can also connect directly via wired Ethernet. So instead of connecting via the Wi-Fi connection, I could simply plug a laptop into a camcorder via an Ethernet cable. And if you do that, you can basically check the IP address of the camcorder in the network settings, enter that IP address into a browser, and it will give you remote control of the camera. And it will just open a simple remote control page on the camera, which allows you to access the system, which is quite nice. That doesn't, however, give you any monitoring on the camera. If you want picture monitoring as well, you have to use the Content Browser Mobile application, which allows the picture monitoring to come through. this sort of simple system where you have a simple browser page that opens for the camcorder when you browse to its IP address is just simple remote control. If you just bear with me a second again, I'm just going to try and reconnect to the camera. I just tested this with Rob just before we set off, before we started the presentation this morning, and it worked absolutely fine. This is just typical. So I'll just have another go at connecting. Now I'll come back to it at the end of the presentation and see if I can get it to go again. Isn't that typical? So the other options we have for wireless, for control of the camera, as I say, are a direct connection, or that direct connection can kind of go via an access point as well, so that you could connect a camera to your wireless router in your office or whatever, and then from a laptop connected to the same network, you can then get access to the camera for remote control as well. So there are quite a number of different options for controlling the camera, but the simplest is to just tap your phone with using network NFC connection on the side of the camera that does the authentication, and it will automatically launch Content Browser Mobile, and you can start and stop your camcorder, get a little monitoring feed, and it works really nicely, usually. So the next thing I'm going to come along to is streaming, which is all the rage apparently these days. Lots of people doing streaming. But what is it? What are we talking about here, really? Well, streaming is the ability to send the live output of the camera over a network connection. So it's sending video over a data connection, which is nothing new or exciting really, except of course that it's all done in near enough real time, though there will be some kind of delay or latency involved in the system. So it's a little bit different to just connecting an SDI cable or something. There will always be some latency. There's always some bandwidth limitations in terms of the amount of data that you can transfer. And because it's basically a live stream, you can't go back and resend your data. If the data is not received at the other end, well, that's tough luck. It's too late. You can't stop the football match and rewind the players and tell them to take that penalty again. You just have to accept the fact that you missed that bit. And this, if you don't receive it, tough, it's too late kind of policy is quite an important aspect of streaming. And the data from the camera also has to be transcoded into a streaming format. And the streaming format is, or should more accurately, protocol, is a set of rules for how the data is transferred. But the data is still typically compressed using tools such as H.264 and H.265, the traditional compression tools that we're all used to. But you have a different set of rules about how those packets of data are sent out into the wide world, and how they're received, and what order the packages are received in, and so on, and what happens if you miss a package and that kind of thing. And all those rules are defined by the streaming format. So you can't directly stream an SDI or HDMI output or a recorded file. It has to go through some kind of encoding process that puts it into the right structure to go over a streaming service. And of course, there will be quality compromises to be made, because when we're streaming, we can never absolutely guarantee the bandwidth. And I'm connected to Zoom here, and I've got a reasonable bandwidth over my network connection, but I've no control over how it gets to you or your connection bandwidth. So, and at any time I could get some contention issues on my network connection, and it'd be restricted. And the rules would have to change, and the system would have to adapt and increase the compression and drop data in order to manage the bandwidth available. So we have to accept generally that a streaming output will have some quality compromise. Whereas if we're talking about file transfer, as I was a little earlier on, mentioned that that's another function of the network connection, file transfer is a bit different. File transfer, you're taking a direct copy of what is in your recorded file and transferring it to a different computer, a different server at some remote location. And because you're doing a clone, if you like, the ones and noughts in your recorded file on your camcorder should ideally end up being exactly the same as the ones and noughts on your recorded file on your remote server. And because of that, it may take longer than real time. So typically, file transfer is not a real-time operation. It's something that will take longer than real time, and it could be much longer than real time. And you end up with a file size the same as it was on the card in the camera. And as I mentioned yesterday, we can use both full resolution or proxy resolution pictures to send those files. And there are checks to make sure it all arrives safely. Handshaking goes on to make sure that an error checking to make sure that all your ones and noughts have arrived safely and are correctly packaged into the appropriate file. And there is no quality compromise on a file transfer. So we've got two different key modes of operation here, file transfer and streaming. Streaming, of course, we can go live and to basically to the whole world if we want to pay enough money or use enough services. And just a quick word about the terminology involved here. Streaming generally can use two different protocols, user datagram protocol, UDP, or transmission control protocol, TCP. And they're two different ways of transferring data. And UDP basically is just sends the data out, and if you get it, good, and if it doesn't arrive on time, well, tough luck. And is kind of the way you would think live streaming would work. TCP is a more secure protocol, if you like, in terms of making sure that the data gets there, and relies on a lot of handshaking. And it sends a packet of data, and it says, I'm sending a packet of data, and the receiving end says, oh, I'll wait for it. And then the other one says, did you get it? And yes, I've got it fine, and it should have this amount of data in it. Yes, it's got that amount of data in it. Okay, please send the next one. And there's all this sort of communication going on with TCP to make sure that all the data packets arrive in the correct order and nothing goes amiss. But that takes time to do all that checking, and introduces considerable latency into the system. UDP system is just chuck it out there and hope somebody gets it. And there's an amusing, well, I say amusing, it's amusing if you're an IT kind of person, cartoon there about wanting to hear a funny UDP joke. You may not get it, and I won't really care. Pause for the tumbleweed to blow through there. So UDP and TCP are pretty important aspects of what's going on. And we've also got different types of streaming available in the camera. So if I look at, I'll look at the, I've got a Z280 camera here where I can go into the network menu. Sorry, that's the one. Too many cameras, too many menus. And in the network menu, this is a little bit different, this menu, because under streaming, I've got ordinary streaming, and I've also got RTMP, RTMPS streaming, real-time messaging protocol, or secure real-time messaging protocol streaming. And those are just two different flavors of streaming protocol. And there are many different flavors. RTMP and RTMPS are the most common flavors for all the social media platforms. So if you're streaming to YouTube or Instagram or whatever it may be, all the major platforms tend to use RTMP and RTMPS, the secure version of it. There's old school MPEG-2 transport streaming, which you might use, for instance, if you were engaging the services of a streaming services provider. And they would take that simple transport stream for you and then encode it into all the different flavors that you would need for all your different social media platforms. Sony have their own QoS streaming mode, network client mode. You'll see that as NCM mode in the streaming options on the camera, which is a different way of sending data and has a lot of error correction built into it. And Sony's QoS streaming system relies on you having a Sony Magic Box at the other end to decode that special, secure and very powerful streaming coding. And it's a bit like something called SRT. And SRT is the new kid on the block, well, newish really, and it's called Secure Reliable Transport. I don't think they put much effort into naming it there. Secure Reliable Transport didn't take much imagination. I mean, if you look at things like perceptual quantization or hybrid log gamma in HDR world, those are pretty imaginative names. SRT, a bit dull, but it's a very strong and very good at adapting to different data rates and different bandwidths that you might have available. And that is likely to appear on more and more bits of kit. We're already starting to see it on things like Sony's BRC, PTZ cameras and things like that, and more and more kit will appear with SRT in the future. So there are lots of different flavors, and not all of the cameras will do all of the different flavors. So it can be a little bit confusing. So I'll give you a guide to who can stream to what a little bit later on. So who can you send your stream to? And the simplest sort of thing, you can send it to a single recipient, which might be a PC running something like VLC on your local network. Or you could send it to a service provider such as Ustream, who can send it to as many viewers as you're prepared to pay for. And obviously Facebook and YouTube Live would be the obvious clients. Just having a quick review of the streaming formats on the various camcorders. Your old school 3-chip shoulder mount camcorders like the X400 just have simple MPEG-2 transport stream available. The new kids on the block, things like the Z280, the Z190, the Z90, have something called RTMP and RTMPS, which enable you to stream directly to YouTube from that sort of camera. And we're seeing this to appear on more camcorders as time goes by. At this point, I might just try and operate the streaming on the Z280 to show you how it works with a bit of luck. So if I look at my Z280 camcorder, there are various streaming settings here, and I'm going to try and use not the normal MPEG-2 transport stream settings. I'm going to use the RTMP, RTMPS streams to try and send my stream to a social media platform. And if I go into that setting, I can choose one of my preset setups, if you like, and you can save 3 different setups for your streaming. It's a bit tedious entering the streaming settings, but because you can have 3 presets, you can quickly change between one and the other. And I'll just show you what's in RTMP1 setting. And on this particular setting, I've set it up to transmit a stream to YouTube. And I've chosen the streaming format in terms of resolution and bitrate, 6 megabits per second. This is where it's going to. There's a password required. And if you're using the RTMPS, the secure version, you will need a certificate, a security certificate called a PEM file, which makes life a bit more difficult. But I'm not going to use the secure streaming mode because nobody's interested in my stream. And basically, once you've done that, you just set your settings and you're away. So I've all I need to do now is get the correct settings from YouTube. And if I go to YouTube, if you set up an account with someone like YouTube, and it's very much the same procedure for all the other social media platforms. Obviously, me being an old git, I'm not totally familiar with social media platforms and all this kind of thing, but they all work in a similar kind of way. And basically, it's free, and I can get the stream settings from YouTube that I have to add into my camera. So, for instance, there is the destination that I'm sending my stream to, which has to be entered into the camera, and a password. And that's pretty much all you need, really. You need, where am I going to send my stream to, and what's the password to check that it's genuine and coming from the correct person. And I can copy these settings to the clipboard. Now, this is the most tedious bit of the whole operation, because you have to enter this stream destination into the settings on my camcorder. So I have to take those settings and put them into the streaming settings on my camcorder here, and entering all this stuff using a slightly clumsy up, down, right and left character generator is a bit painful. So if you're in a hurry to start streaming, just give yourself an extra 20 minutes, because it's going to take you that long to enter the password and the streaming key on your character generator on the camera. There is, I have to say, a little application from Sony, and I'll send you a link to it via Rob and the guys at Visuals. And that allows you to automatically cut and paste via an SD card these settings into your camcorder. It's not that brilliant, to be honest, but it does save some time. And as I say, this whole bit of writing in the destination and the stream key is the most tedious bit of the whole business. Now, what I've done is I have allocated an external button on the side of my camera to be the streaming start button. So with a bit of luck, I can press that button, and you can see that the setting has changed to on the menus. So I've just got a button on the side of the camera. I press that, and with a bit of luck, we can now see that just to the left of my picture-in-picture that's in the top right-hand corner, can you see the RTMP sort of logo has brighted up to show that we're now streaming? And oh, and it's already there. And if I pan the camera now, we'll wait for about 5 seconds, and there we go, the camera moves. And if I pan the camera again, and there we go. So we've got a fair bit of latency there, but I'm streaming live to the internet, to the entire world if they want to watch, which they don't, I have to say. I have 1 concurrent viewer and 0 likes. So I don't think I'm going to make it as an influencer on the World Wide Web at any time soon. So there we are, streaming via RTMP onto YouTube, and it's I wouldn't say simple, but and once you've set up the system, it's pretty easy. You can just press the button on the side of the camera and it starts streaming, as long as you have some kind of network connection. And I've already set it up to be connected to my Wi-Fi. And if I didn't have a Wi-Fi zone in the immediate area, I would have to use either a USB dongle, as we discussed yesterday, or some kind of MiFi hotspot system to connect. And that's what I'll try and talk about next, actually, if that's okay. So if I put you back to one side for a minute, we'll carry on looking at the connections and so on. So that's the way I've connected, but there are lots of different ways of streaming. And basically, you need some kind of software device or hardware widget that converts your stream of traditional data from your camera, which might be HDMI or SDI, into an RTMP or an MPEG-2 or an SRT stream, a streaming feed. And there are lots of different ways of doing this. And I just wanted to go through a couple of scenarios, if you don't mind. So here's our access point, and we're all connecting to Wi-Fi via various bits and pieces here to the outside world. And if we look at a camera like, well, we could take the A7S Mark III as an example, actually. You'll find that lots of cameras, things like the RX100 and the RX10, the really nice little 1-inch consumer cameras and things. And there's a whole range of cameras that will allow you to send your image data over USB. And that would be something called USB video class connection, which is more common now. USB used to be just data and files and transferring, but now you can transfer video over it as well. But you have to have some software to manage that. And if you open a laptop, stick a USB lead in between your A7S Mark III and your laptop, and open Imaging Edge, the application that I mentioned earlier, on your camera, that will receive that data via the USB and deliver it to something called OBS, Open Broadcaster Software, which is a very powerful and free to use open source software tool. Other tools are available. And that will convert the image from the camera into a streaming feed, which can then be streamed out to the outside world. If you don't want to use Imaging Edge and the USB connector, or it's not a Sony a camera that has a sort of a webcam output, though I have to say lots of other camera manufacturers have this kind of webcam output as well. You could just use any HDMI source, whatever it happens to be, buy an HDMI capture dongle off that internet for 20 quid, stick that into a USB connector in your laptop or even a tablet, run OBS on it and stream to the outside world. Once again, everything's limited by this bandwidth that you've got to the outside world here, and in an office with a good strong Wi-Fi connection, then that's no problem at all. But you might need another way of connecting to the outside world. So capture dongle, USB. The third way of connecting is to just use a dedicated streaming adapter, and there are many companies selling these sort of boxes, black boxes with an HDMI or indeed an SDI connection on one end, and either a Wi-Fi, a wireless output, or an RJ45 connector, more likely, on the other end of the box, that will take your output from your camera and convert it to a streaming feed. And you can even do that in 4K now with a 12G SDI input with various boxes and so on. But the simplest way of all is what I've just been doing, which is cameras like the Z280 have a streaming encoder built into it, straight out of the camera via a Wi-Fi connection, or indeed, as I mentioned earlier, I could connect better still, an Ethernet cable. And indeed, if I was doing a major job at a big sort of a venue or something, then that's the option you would go for. You wouldn't use Wi-Fi; it'd be too vulnerable to falling over. You would connect via an RJ45 to the access point, and away you go. Final one that I want to mention is something a bit new. I don't know if anybody's feeling particularly rich at the moment, or probably not, given the current circumstances. But you could buy yourself an Xperia Pro phone, which is a very powerful piece of kit. And the Xperia Pro has an HDMI connector on it. So you could take your camera, and I shudder to suggest you could use any camera that might not even be a Sony camera. I mean, why you would want to do that, I really don't know, but it's possible. And you can connect to the micro HDMI connector on your Xperia Pro phone and use the streaming application inside it and the 5G connection, and you've got a very powerful compact tool that also works as a monitor as well. So you can monitor your pictures, stream in 5G, all via a little HDMI connection. and just Velcro the thing to the top of your camcorder, whatever it may be. Though I'm sure there are any number of extremely nice brackets made by any number of other companies that will attach your camera to the phone to the camera. So there's lots of different ways through the system to get your stream out into the outside world. I'll skip that bit. Z280. I've just done a quick summary here of the procedure I went through to get my Z280 streaming. Sony, as I mentioned before, have something called advanced streaming with Sony QoS, quality of service sort of technology, which is this error correction that they use in something called their network client mode. So if you see NCM, network client mode, somewhere in the menus, I think, here we go. So network client mode in the FX9 menus here. This is to do with Sony's specialized streaming service that's a bit like SRT and has a very low latency and lots of error correction and adapts very nicely to changing bandwidth and is a very powerful tool. And that's used a lot with the virtual production system that we're going to have a look at tomorrow, if that's okay. And it's also used with XDCam Air. And this brings us on to file transfer. Just before we go on to file transfer, as I mentioned, a lot of cameras can work as a cheap webcam. Sorry, no, not as a cheap webcam, as an expensive webcam. And this imaging edge application is what you would need for that. And there's a list of supported devices here, which you can look at on the recorded program feed, or perhaps the guys at Viz can send over a link on the website. So the final application, I need to hurry along here, I'm running out of time, is file transfer. And basically you can connect to a remote server in the cloud, or at the headquarters of your news organization, whatever it may be. So you set up a server somewhere remotely, and your proxy and high resolution files can be uploaded to that server. As I said before, it takes longer than real time. And just going back to what we discussed yesterday about bandwidth connections, if you've got a decent home Wi-Fi system like I'm using here, my upload speed is about 10 megabits per second or something, which means if I'm recording material at 50 megabits per second, it's going to take me 5 times real time to upload. I've also got the option to use the proxy recorded files, and that's a much better option for quick and easy offlining of your production. And cameras like the FX9, Z280, X400, FX6 will all record the proxy files in parallel with your main full resolution files. And if you record them at 1920 by 1080, 9 megabits per second, you get excellent quality pictures. And there are numerous occasions on which broadcasters have chosen to use the proxy files and not bothered waiting for the main full resolution files to catch up, because they're just so good. And compared to somebody recording on their phone that they've forgotten to turn the right way around, they're just excellent quality. And typically, so say you're at 9 megabits per second, the highest resolution of the proxies, put a 128 gig SD card in, which is about 20 quid these days, and you've got about 24 hours of proxy material on your SD card. And you can then upload those to the remote server. And the general idea is that your operators in the field will be recording material, and the proxies will be uploading automatically as a background process onto your server for your station. And from there, they can be accessed via by whoever wants to get to them, basically, in order to produce your offline. Or indeed, you could use them as the online if you wanted to. You could send the full resolution pictures, but as 5G comes out, that's going to become more and more of a viable option. But for the moment, the most viable option is proxy recording, and which means that all the time, whenever your camera can get a connection, whether it's a Wi-Fi connection or a 5G connection or a 4G connection or whatever, it will use whatever connection it can find, whatever dongles you put into it, whatever passwords you put in to connect to the Wi-Fi. It will use that bandwidth whenever it can to just continuously upload those proxy files onto a cloud server. So when you sit down for your hour lunch break that you guys all get, you do get an hour lunch break, I assume, and while you're having your lunch at the local restaurant, your camera can be busily connecting to their Wi-Fi and uploading your proxy material to the cloud for you. And that's the general principle of Sony's XDCam Air service, which is a full service that allows you, as well as uploading the files, it allows you to sort of, for instance, send file naming structures directly back to the camcorder. It allows you to send an all file to set up physically the camcorder to make sure that the settings on one camcorder match all the others. So your story sort of details are going one direction and your image files are going the other direction. And that's part of the XDCam Air service, which is the kind of thing that sort of major broadcasters and news organizations will be using. But you don't have to use that. You could just simply set up a secure server in order to upload files. And you can do that, that's no problem. But you probably need the IT skills of someone who can set up the security settings on your server to make sure your pictures can weave their way through the security firewalls and so on of your organization onto your cloud server. And Sony has its own cloud server, C Media Cloud. And I think you can get a sort of a test account with a limited amount of storage space on it. And it's a very powerful cloud service designed particularly for film and TV production, and is well worth a look. So that's the upload side of things. And tomorrow we're going to be having a look at something called Sony's Virtual Production Switcher, which is continuing the theme of this cloud-based business, a cloud-based switcher. Everybody needs something based in the cloud now. I think my kettle downstairs is actually a cloud-based kettle now. It's all transferring over to the cloud. And tomorrow we'll have a look at how that works and the kind of things you can do with it. So we'll park it there for now. If there's any questions, do please ask. Oh, sorry, there are a couple of questions. Can you connect the Z280 directly with USB to a laptop? Yes, you can. Yes, you could. It appears as another drive on the laptop. Well, sorry, I say the camcorder appears, the actual physical cards. So the S/S cards on your Z280 camera will appear as separate drives on your system, and you can then just drag and drop the files. If you want to stream to the laptop, you would need a network connection, which would be via an Ethernet cable or connecting both the Z280 and the laptop to the same network via Wi-Fi. Okay, folks. Well, thank you for joining us. And I do apologise I couldn't get the content browser mobile, the phone sharing service working there. That's just one of those things. It'll work immediately. We stop the webinar now, of course. And maybe if I get a chance, I'll just very quickly spend a couple of minutes going through it tomorrow morning when we do the virtual production switcher. So if anyone does need to see that, then tune in tomorrow morning for an extra bonus 5 minutes where we have another go at connecting the content browser mobile.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks for that, Neil. And we'll just end it now. Thanks for listening, and hope you all enjoyed it, and hope to see you tomorrow for session 3. Thanks very much.
Thank you, guys. Bye now.